You were always her favorite. That's the only reason she gave you anything. My Aunt Patricia spat those words at me across the courtroom like venom, her face twisted with 30 years of resentment finally given permission to surface. My cousin Derek nodded beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. My own mother sat behind them, on their side of the courtroom, refusing to meet my eyes. But here, that's what none of them knew. Grandma didn't give me the recipe because I was her favorite. She gave it to me because I was the only one who ever showed up. The only one who spent every Sunday in her kitchen, flour on my hands and love in my heart. The only one who listened when she talked about the old country, about her mother, about the secrets passed down through generations of women who understood that food was memory made edible. And now they wanted to take that from me too. My name is Marisol Vega, and my grandmother's cinnamon empanadas saved my life. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that literally. When I was 19, broke, alone, and one bad decision away from disappearing entirely, those empanadas gave me a reason to wake up every morning. They gave me something to build. Something to believe in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, in a cramped kitchen in El Paso, Texas, where a woman named Elena Vega spent 60 years perfecting a recipe that would eventually tear her family apart. Grandma Elena came to America in 1962 with nothing but a suitcase and a handwritten recipe card tucked into her bra. She was 17, fleeing a situation back in Mexico that she never fully explained, and she arrived in El Paso with no English, no money, and no plan. What she had was the recipe. Her mother had given it to her the night she left, pressed the worn card into her hands and whispered, "This is our family's heart. Protect it. Pass it on. But only to someone who understands what it means." Those cinnamon empanadas weren't just pastries. They were 3 generations of Vega women perfecting a single creation. The dough recipe came from my great-great-grandmother. The cinnamon filling was my great-grandmother's innovation. And Grandma Elena added her own touch, a hint of orange zest that made the whole thing sing. She never wrote the complete recipe down. Not once. She kept each component separate, memorized differently, taught only through doing. Recipes on paper can be stolen, she told me once. Recipes in your hands, in your heart, those belong to you forever. For 60 years, she made those empanadas for every family gathering, every holiday, every celebration. They were legendary in our community. People offered her money, begged for the recipe, tried to reverse engineer the flavors. She always refused. When I die, she'd say, the right person will know what to do. Everyone assumed she meant the whole family. That she'd leave the recipe in her will, divided equally, a shared inheritance. Everyone was wrong. I was never supposed to be special. I was the quiet granddaughter, the one who got overlooked at family gatherings. My mother, Diana, was Grandma Elena's youngest daughter, the accident baby who arrived 10 years after her siblings and never quite fit into the family dynamic. That outsider status transferred to me. My cousins were older, louder, more demanding of attention. Aunt Patricia's kids, Derek and Melissa, were the golden grandchildren. They got the best presents, the most praise, the seats of honor at every family dinner. I got the leftovers. The hand-me-downs. The, "Oh, Marisol's here too," acknowledgement. But I also got something they didn't, Sundays with Grandma. It started when I was 8. My mother worked weekend shifts at the hospital, and she needed somewhere to drop me. Aunt Patricia refused. "I have my own kids to worry about," so Grandma Elena volunteered. Those first Sundays, I just sat in her kitchen and watched. I was a shy kid, nervous and uncertain, and Grandma didn't push. She just cooked, humming old songs, moving through her kitchen with the grace of someone who'd performed the same dance for decades. One day, she handed me a ball of dough. "Your hands are small," she said. "Good for shaping. Show me what you can do." I made a lumpy, misshapen empanada that fell apart in the fryer. Grandma ate it anyway, declared it perfect for a first try, and told me to make another. I made hundreds after that. Thousands. Every Sunday for 11 years, I stood beside my grandmother and learned. Not just the recipe, though she taught me that too, piece by piece, component by component, but everything. How to measure by feel. How to know when the oil was ready by the sound it made. How to fold the dough so it sealed perfectly every time. By the time I was 19, I could make Grandma Elena's empanadas with my eyes closed. Nobody else in the family could make them at all. My life fell apart the year I turned 19. I'd been dating a guy named Victor, charming, older, everything my mother warned me about. When I found out I was pregnant, he disappeared. When I told my mother, she told me I'd made my bed. "You're on your own," she said. "I can't keep cleaning up your messes." I dropped out of community college. Lost my apartment. Spent 3 weeks sleeping in my car before I finally swallowed my pride and drove to Grandma Elena's house at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "You'll stay in the back bedroom. We start baking at 7. She didn't ask questions. Didn't lecture. didn't make me feel like a failure. She just put me to work. For the next 6 months, I lived in my grandmother's house. I helped her cook, clean, manage her medications. I watched her body slowly fail while her mind stayed sharp as ever. And every Sunday, we made empanadas together, me doing most of the physical work now, her guiding from her chair with precise instructions. One afternoon, she called me into her bedroom. "Marisol, I need to tell you something important." I sat on the edge of her bed, nervous. Her health had been declining, every serious conversation felt like it might be the last. "I'm giving you the recipe," she said. "All of it. The complete thing." "Grandma, let me finish." Her eyes were fierce, the way they got when she wouldn't accept argument. "I've watched all my grandchildren grow up. Derek is selfish. Melissa is lazy. Your mother's other children don't know the difference between a comal and a frying pan. But you," she reached out and took my hand. "You understand. You've always understood. But the family, they'll be angry. The family wants to sell it. Patricia has been asking me for years to let her monetize it. License it to some restaurant chain. Turn it into a product." She shook her head. "That's not what my mother gave me. That's not what this recipe is for." "What is it for?" "For feeding people with love. For building something that matters. For keeping our family's heart beating even when the family itself forgets what that means." She squeezed my hand. "I'm going to help you trademark it. Protect it legally so no one can take it from you. And I'm going to give you my blessing to build something with it, something real. A business. A legacy. Whatever you want." "Grandma, I'm 19. I'm pregnant. I'm living in your spare bedroom. I can't." "You can. You will." She smiled. "I didn't give you 11 years of Sundays for nothing, Mija. Now go get my lawyer on the phone. We have paperwork to do." The trademark was filed in March 2019. Grandma Elena sat beside me at the lawyer's office, signing the notarized permission that transferred full rights to me. She was frail by then, needing a wheelchair, but her signature was strong and clear. "Elena Vega's Cinnamon Empanadas," the trademark read. "Recipe and preparation method proprietary to Marisol Vega." The lawyer filed everything. I received the official registration 4 months later. Grandma died 6 weeks after that. The funeral was chaos. Not the ceremony itself, that was beautiful, packed with people from the community who'd loved my grandmother for decades. The chaos came afterward, when the will was read. Grandma Elena had divided her estate carefully. The house went to my mother and Aunt Patricia jointly. Her savings were split among all the grandchildren. Her jewelry was distributed based on a list she'd written years ago. But the recipe wasn't mentioned. Because legally, it wasn't hers to give anymore. It was already mine. Aunt Patricia figured it out first. "Where's the recipe?" she demanded, cornering me at the reception. She always said she'd leave it to the family. "It's not in the will." "Where is it?" "She gave it to me," I said quietly. "Before she died." "Gave it to you?" "You can't just give a family heirloom to one person." "She could." "She did. It's trademarked in my name with her notarized permission." Patricia's face went through several colors. "We'll see about that." I should have known it was just beginning. I gave birth to my daughter 3 months after Grandma died. I named her Elena. Those first years were brutal, single motherhood, no degree, no family support. My mother had sided with Aunt Patricia, convinced I'd somehow manipulated Grandma into giving me the recipe. My cousins spread rumors that I'd forged documents, taken advantage of an old woman's dementia. None of it was true. But truth doesn't matter when people have already decided you're the villain. What saved me was the recipe. I started small, selling empanadas at the local farmer's market on weekends. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., bake until dawn, load everything into my beat-up Honda, and spend the day selling to strangers who'd never tasted anything like Grandma Elena's creation. They sold out every single time. Within a year, I had a waiting list. Within 2 years, I'd saved enough for a food truck. Within 3 years, I opened my first brick-and-mortar location, Elena's Kitchen, a tiny bakery in downtown El Paso that specialized in traditional Mexican pastries. The empanadas were the star. Food critics came. Then food bloggers. Then a segment on the local news. Then a write-up in Texas Monthly that called my grandmother's recipe a transcendent experience, cinnamon and memory wrapped in perfect dough. By 2024, Elena's Kitchen had 3 locations across Texas. We'd been featured in national publications. Celebrity chefs had visited. We were profitable, growing, and completely booked for catering through the end of the year. And my family was furious. The lawsuit arrived on the 5th anniversary of my grandmother's death. Vega family versus Marisol Vega, the filing read. Claim for intellectual property theft, misappropriation of family heritage, and unjust enrichment. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Ricardo, my cousins Derek and Melissa, and, this one hurt the most, my own mother, Diana. 5 members of my family, united in their determination to take away everything I'd built. Their argument was simple: the recipe belonged to the entire Vega family. It was a shared inheritance, passed down through generations, and I had no right to commercialize it without their permission. The trademark, they claimed, was obtained through undue influence over an elderly woman with diminishing capacity. They wanted the trademark invalidated. They wanted a share of all profits Elena's Kitchen had ever made. They wanted the business itself, arguing that it was built on stolen property. The case was assigned to Judge Howard Mitchell, a no-nonsense veteran of the Texas civil court system. The trial date was set for September. I hired the best intellectual property lawyer I could afford, a woman named Sandra Okonkwo who built her reputation defending small business owners against corporate giants. When she reviewed my case, she actually laughed. "They have nothing," she said. "Your grandmother was competent when she signed those documents. I've reviewed the medical records, the lawyer's notes, everything. There's not a single shred of evidence supporting their claims." "Then why are they doing this?" "Because they're angry. Because they feel entitled to something they never earned." Sandra looked at me over her glasses. "And because they think you'll settle. They think you'll pay them off just to make it go away." "I won't." "Good. Then let's go to court." The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. My aunt had made sure of that. She spent months telling everyone who would listen about the family betrayal, the stolen recipe, the ungrateful granddaughter who robbed an old woman. Half the gallery was filled with relatives I barely recognized, all there to watch me get what I supposedly deserved. Elena's Kitchen had its supporters too. Employees who'd become family. Customers who'd driven hours to show up. Community members who knew the real story. But the real battle was happening at the front of the room. Aunt Patricia took the stand first. She cried, actual tears, as she described her mother's recipe, the family tradition, the devastation of learning it had been stolen by her niece. "My mother would never have wanted this," she sobbed. "She wanted the recipe shared among all her children and grandchildren. Marisol took advantage of her. She manipulated a dying woman." Cross-examination was brutal. "Mrs. Vega," Sandra began, "how often did you visit your mother in the final years of her life?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "I was busy. I have my own family." "How often?" "A few times a year. Holidays." "And how often did my client, Marisol, visit?" "I don't know exactly. Every Sunday. For 11 years. Would you say that's accurate?" Patricia's jaw tightened. She was using those visits to manipulate my mother, moved to strike. Non-responsive. The judge nodded. "The witness will answer the question asked." It continued like that. Sandra methodically dismantled every family member's testimony, revealing the truth they tried to hide. None of them had ever shown interest in the recipe until it became valuable. None of them had spent time with Grandma Elena. None of them could even describe how the empanadas were made. Derek, my cousin, was the most embarrassing. "Mr. Vega, you claim the recipe is your family heritage. Can you tell me one ingredient in your grandmother's empanadas?" He went blank. "Flour. Obviously. And cinnamon." "What kind of cinnamon?" "There's more than one kind?" "Can you describe the folding technique your grandmother used?" It's a fold. You fold it." "Have you ever made these empanadas yourself?" "No. But that doesn't mean." No further questions. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, hand steady even though my heart was racing. I looked out at the gallery, at my aunt's smug expression, my mother's downcast eyes, my daughter Elena sitting in the front row with my best friend, watching her mother fight for everything we'd built. The opposing counsel, a slick lawyer named Franklin Hayes, approached me with a predatory smile. "Ms. Vega, isn't it true that you were in a vulnerable position when your grandmother allegedly gave you this recipe? Homeless, pregnant, desperate?" "I was in a difficult situation." "Yes. And isn't it possible that you exaggerated your relationship with your grandmother to take advantage of her generosity?" "No. Our relationship was real. 11 years of Sundays. Hundreds of hours in her kitchen. She taught me everything she knew because I was the only one who wanted to learn. But she was elderly. Ill. Perhaps not thinking clearly." Objection. Sandra stood. "Counsel is speculating without evidence. Mrs. Elena Vega's medical records, which have been submitted as Exhibit 14, show no cognitive impairment at the time the trademark documents were signed." Sustained. Hayes tried another angle. "Ms. Vega, you're making significant money from this recipe. Millions of dollars. Don't you think the family deserves a share?" "I think the family had 60 years to learn this recipe. 60 years to spend time with my grandmother. 60 years to show any interest at all in preserving her legacy." I looked directly at Aunt Patricia. "They didn't." "I did. But the recipe belongs to the Vega family. The recipe belongs to whoever my grandmother chose to give it to. That's how inheritance works." That's how intellectual property works. She made a legal, notarized decision while she was competent and clear-minded. The only people who have a problem with that decision are the ones who never bothered to earn it. The judge called a recess before closing arguments. I was sitting on a bench in the hallway when my mother approached. We hadn't spoken directly since the lawsuit was filed. Marisol. Mom. She sat down beside me, looking older than I remembered. Tired. The fight seemed to have drained out of her. I shouldn't have joined this lawsuit, she said quietly. I knew it was wrong. Patricia was so convincing. She said we deserved something. That Mama would have wanted us all to benefit. Grandma gave you part of the house. She gave you money. She gave you her jewelry, the pieces that mattered to her. I know. But the recipe, everyone always talked about the recipe. It felt like you got the thing that actually mattered. It only mattered because I made it matter. I turned to face her. Do you know why Grandma chose me? It wasn't because I was her favorite. It was because I was the only one who showed up. Every Sunday. For 11 years. Even when I was a teenager and could have been doing anything else. Even when I was pregnant and terrified. Even when she was dying and everyone else was too busy with their own lives. I know. Then why are you here? Why are you trying to take this from me? Mom wiped her eyes. Because I was jealous. Because my whole life, I was the afterthought daughter, and then you became the special granddaughter, and I couldn't stand that my own child had what I never got. What you never got was given freely. You just never reached for it. She nodded. Didn't argue. For a long moment, we sat in silence. I'm going to ask Patricia to drop the case, she finally said. I don't know if she will. But I'm removing my name. Whatever happens. I'm sorry, Marisol. For all of it. She walked away before I could respond. Aunt Patricia didn't drop the case. But it didn't matter. Judge Mitchell delivered his verdict 3 days later, in a courtroom just as packed as it had been on day one. My family sat on one side, rigid with anticipation. I sat on the other, holding my daughter's hand. In the matter of Vega family versus Marisol Vega, the judge began, I find for the defendant. The murmur from Patricia's side was immediate. The judge silenced it with a look. The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that Elena Vega, while competent and of sound mind, made a deliberate and legal decision to transfer her recipe to her granddaughter. The trademark documents are valid. The notarization is proper. There is no evidence, none, of undue influence, manipulation, or diminished capacity. He looked directly at my aunt. What I see in this case is a family that ignored a woman for years, then became outraged when she gave her most precious possession to the one grandchild who actually showed up. That is not theft. That is not misappropriation. That is an elderly woman making a choice about her own legacy. He turned to me. Ms. Vega, the trademark stands. The profits from your business are yours, earned through your own labor and your grandmother's trust. Case dismissed. I walked out of that courthouse into Texas sunshine, my daughter's hand in mine. Behind me, I could hear Aunt Patricia arguing with her lawyer. Derek was making threats he couldn't back up. My mother stood apart from them, watching me with something that might have been regret. I didn't stop. Didn't engage. Didn't look back. Mommy, Elena said, does this mean we won? It means Grandma won, I told her. She made a choice a long time ago, and today the court said her choice mattered. She gave you the recipe because you loved her. She gave me the recipe because I showed up. Every Sunday. Even when it was hard. I knelt down to look my daughter in the eyes. That's the secret, baby. Not talent. Not luck. Just showing up, over and over, when everyone else finds excuses not to. Elena's Kitchen opened its 4th location 6 months after the trial. We're in Houston now. Then Dallas. Then, if everything goes according to plan, nationwide. My grandmother's empanadas are feeding thousands of people every week, strangers who never know the story behind the recipe, who just know that something about these pastries tastes like memory and warmth. My mother and I have started talking again. Slowly. Carefully. The wound is still there, but we're trying. Aunt Patricia hasn't spoken to me since the verdict. Neither have my cousins. I've made peace with that. My daughter Elena is 11 now, the same age I was when I started learning at Grandma's side. On Sundays, she helps me in the kitchen. Her hands are small. Good for shaping. I'm teaching her everything. Not just the recipe, though she'll get that too, when she's ready. But the real lessons. The ones my grandmother taught me through a decade of Sunday mornings. Show up. Keep showing up. Master your craft. Let the doubters doubt. And when they come for what's yours, when they try to take what you built with love and sweat and 11 years of flour-covered hands, look them in the eye and tell them the truth. This was never stolen. This was earned. One Sunday at a time. They called me a thief for building something from what my grandmother gave me. They took me to court, convinced the world that I'd manipulated an old woman out of her legacy. But the judge saw the truth. The documents saw the truth. And now the whole world knows, Grandma Elena's recipe went exactly where she wanted it to go, to the granddaughter who showed up when everyone else couldn't be bothered. Some inheritances aren't about blood. They're about love. About presence. About being there for the people who matter. I was there. They weren't. And that made all the difference.